10 years ago, on the night of 26 November, 10 Pakistani terrorists who had entered Mumbai by boat began coordinated attacks that lasted for 3 days. They killed 166 people. The horror unfolded from the iconic Taj Hotel to the CST station, making headlines around the world. We all watched it live on television as security forces launched a massive fight back. India was never the same again. 26/11 was a turning point for many reasons. We had seen terror attacks for many years, but this one was different. The attack and its sheer scale that had a huge impact that can be felt even today. 9 of the terrorists were killed that day, but one survived, Ajmal Kasab, who was later tried and executed. 10 years later, the man who plotted and planned 26/11, Lashkar-e-Taiba founder Hafiz Saeed, is still a free man in Pakistan. The trial in Pakistan has barely progressed and has become a total farce. And in all of this, the most important question we have to ask ourselves is, are we safer today? Well, the Indian government today hit out at Pakistan, saying that the planners of the attack are still roaming free, with the foreign ministry issuing a statement saying that Pakistan is showing little sincerity in bringing the perpetrators to justice. The planners of 26/11 still roam the streets of Pakistan with impunity, the MEA said. That the attack was planned, executed and launched from Pakistani territory. That we once again call on the government of Pakistan to give up their double standards and bring the perpetrators of the horrific attack to justice. India also welcomed a statement that was issued by the United States, calling upon Pakistan to implement sanctions against the terrorists responsible for these attacks, including the LET and its affiliates. In fact, the US issuing that statement earlier this morning, Indian time, with also a fresh reward offer for any information leading to the perpetrators. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo urging Pakistan to take action against those responsible. It's another story that there is already a $10 million bounty that the United States announced on Hafiz Saeed about 6 years ago. And, well, that hasn't had much of an impact. So will this have an impact? We don't know. The question we need to ask ourselves today, as we said, is, are we safer as a country? Would India be able to prevent another 26/11 from happening again? Joining us on the panel this evening, we have Mayami Chandani, who's a senior journalist and assistant professor at the Ashoka University. We have Ujjwal Nigam, who was a special public prosecutor for 26/11. Adrian Levy, author of one of the defining books on the 26/11 attacks, The Siege, joining us via Skype from London tonight. And let me begin with you, Adrian Levy. Very simply, do you think that India is in a better position today to prevent a similar attack from taking place, or have we really learnt very peripheral lessons from 26/11?
In some structural ways, India is better placed now. The operation of the National Security Council, if you like, with National Security advisors silos beneath the PMO, is a good structure, which I think will work very well in real time for India. The reorganisation of special forces also has happened effectively to give them local regional centres for rapid deployment. I think all of that shows extraordinary signs of hopefulness. But the failure of legislators to get to grips with the reform of the intelligence service, that the intelligence service itself has requested, the professionalisation of the service, the decalcifying of the bureaucracy, and an attempt to create a modern, free-flowing service that's fitted to the kind of challenges facing India hasn't happened. So I think it's a kind of good news and bad news scenario, a sour sweet.
If you could tell us a little bit more about the sort of intelligence weaknesses that you think we still need to address. You wrote a piece a few days ago, a pretty strong piece, sort of looking at that and other aspects of the terror attack, and you've been critical also in particular of the RNAW and the way that it functions. What are we not learning even from a strike as big as this?
Well, I think, the piece attempted to apply critical thinking to the situation. There's lots to praise, but of the things that went wrong, it's also important to apply lessons from the things that went wrong. RAW officers themselves often say that there's not enough emphasis placed on analysis, that there's not enough emphasis placed on the developing of a service that can recruit young people from all castes, creeds and communities, that reflects the rainbow of communities that exists within the subcontinent. People who have specialist skills that can be brought on to meet this age of advanced technology and cyber warfare. And who even had the languages and cultural background to be able to address it effectively. None of that can happen in the calcified, bureaucratic atmosphere, raw officers say, that exists now. And not only that, but the outfit itself does not have a charter. So in a sense, it does not exist constitutionally in the way that it should do. And it has no adequate oversight, which can also help to free up the calcified aspects of the service. But this isn't just about intelligence failings. So much, 10 years on went right. And it's important to say, before you let the other panelists speak, that this was a victory of humanity over terrorism, in that many people in Mumbai came together to fight this, including police who acted almost in a volunteer capacity, black hats who acted in an improvised capacity, and ordinary waiters and holiday makers who all fought to overcome terrorism. And that's something to reflect on hugely positively 10 years on.
All right. Well, Ujjwal Nigam, you were the special public prosecutor in the trial that took place here. I think you and all Indians actually would be extremely frustrated at the complete lack of progress on the trial on the other side of the border. And, where that stands today, do you really believe we're ever going to see justice from Pakistan, by Pakistan in this?
Nidhi, this is a very moot question today which you are raised. And certainly I am closely following the entire case. I have conducted this case in Mumbai. I went to Pakistan along with the 3 Indian officials. It's an official delegation of the government of India. After the execution of Kasab, we were in Pakistan, Islamabad for about 8 days. We had a long discussion with the Pakistani authorities. We have seen their evidence, and it is a very sorry state of affairs that they did not collect any evidence in respect of the criminal conspiracy which was hatched on the soil of the Pakistan. I categorically told the Pakistan then public prosecutor as to why you did not charge these perpetrators for the charge of criminal conspiracy. He admitted in the presence of the Pakistani high official that yes, we'll amend the charge, and later on when we came back to India, that public prosecutor was murdered. This is a very serious thing. Now, second aspect is that, now what Pakistan is saying, that India has not furnished any evidence, and they are making you and the cry that it's an onerous duty of the Indian government to furnish the evidence. I tried to convince them that look, we have given the evidence in respect of the overtake committed by these 10 attackers in pursuance of the criminal conspiracy hatched on the soil of the Pakistan. We have the prima facie evidence, primary evidence I would say. Primary evidence means the judicial confession of Ajmal Kasab, that certain articles and the goods which were recovered after the attack from the Kuber boat belonging and manufactured in the Pakistan. Thirdly, the GPS which the attackers had broken, of which the data which we have retrieved from the New York laboratory of FBI, that GPS data was showing the waypoints were marked on the GPS from Karachi to Mumbai and Mumbai to Karachi. So this primary evidence was clearly showing that the root of the attack was in the Pakistan. Dossier, this is the hard evidence, and therefore we were expecting that Pakistan will further collect the evidence and will present before the court. Pakistan has failed and clearly told us, sorry, we don't have any evidence. After returning back, Nidhi, I must tell you a very clear thing, back to India, when I found that one David Coleman Headley has been convicted by the Chicago American Court for 35 years because he is one of the conspirators behind the terror attack of 26 November. We all know that David Coleman Headley had visited Mumbai before the attack. He had taken the various photographs of the places of the target.
That's right.
And furnished to the
and in fact, Mr. Nigam, I want to come back to the point of David Headley and the US role, because Adrian Levy has also written a lot about that, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. I want to ask Maya here first. Maya has written a terrific piece on the media in 26/11, which in itself is something I think the media needs to reflect on how we covered that terror attack. But let's just, Maya, take a look first at the US reward today, the $5 million for information leading up to the arrest of the perpetrators. It's just, I mean, my first reaction was, well, why? I mean, you have a $10 million bounty, from 6 years ago on Hafiz Saeed, which made no difference at all. He's a free man. So how do we look at this sort of US announcement.
You know, I think that's a very interesting point about the bounty, and you're absolutely right when you say that there already is a very hefty sum on Hafiz Saeed's head. The LET has been proscribed by the United States in the past. You know, to me it seems like the US administration right now, when it comes to Pakistan, is never quite sure of what to say. They have an overarching position on the fact that Pakistan needs to be reined in as far as the support to terror is concerned, but nothing seems to work. So in the absence of things working, perhaps it just seems to be that, you know, let's just continue making the right statements and making the right noises, because even though nothing is working, at least DC is seen to be keeping up that pressure. I think the fact that, you know, we saw how the Headley trials actually unfolded when the Americans arrested him. We have raised with the United States the issue of intelligence sharing, access to David Headley. All those things went down in the last 10 years. So why are we still in this position where, you know, the Pakistanis still haven't done anything, the Americans are talking about another reward? I think it's just optics, frankly. I mean, I don't see where this is going to end up. So we're alone
in this fight, pretty much.
Pretty much. I think we are. And I think we have to accept that we are alone in this fight, because we've been hearing from the United States now since 9/11, you know, about, and especially since Osama bin Laden was killed in Abbottabad, about the role of the military terror nexus in Pakistan, the intelligence terror nexus in Pakistan. But really, we hear the West talking about this, but their priorities seem to not be, you know, concerning India.
In fact, when you speak of priorities, Adrian Levy, you wrote about that, about how ultimately the United States prioritized getting Osama bin Laden over getting after those who did 26/11. And you know, you have to sort of ask the question, then, are we really alone in this battle against the LET and against terror groups operating from Pakistan?
Well, I think that you're not on your own. In a funny way, in that those groups and the critical mass of jihad that formed in Pakistan began to consume Pakistan. And post the Lal Masjid episode in 2007, when you saw this extraordinary period of suicide bombing, campaigns against the military and against the ISI, Pakistan had to remodel and reset what it was doing. And then began the operations in KPK in South Waziristan and North Waziristan. And one thing to say again that is not all bad news is that this restructuring, which is actually generational, it's a vast, vast campaign. You know, if you look at the problems facing Belgium, facing France, facing the UK in terms of radicalization and de-radicalizing those elements, Pakistan has moved to do that. Where now is Jaish-e-Mohammed? Jaish-e-Mohammed, as one of those sectarian groups on the far right, has been practically minimized. Where is the Punjabi Taliban? They've effectively been crushed and minimized. Most of the high-value Al-Qaeda detainees have been, Al-Qaeda leaders have been detained in Pakistan, and KPK and Fatah has been largely clear, barring the incidents that took place in Orakzai a few days back. This is not to say that everything is rosy. It is not rosy, but there is a generational struggle going on in Pakistan, and sometimes it's not so possible to see that as clearly from India, for all good reasons. You know, there's a huge amount of anger and cynicism felt, particularly on this day, but it is happening.
Well, you know, I would perhaps only argue to say that perhaps, you know, in all of this, the Lashkar seems to continue to thrive in Pakistan, despite everything that's happening to other groups that target Pakistanis, but, you know, those groups targeting India are still looked at with a different prism, which explains why Saeed gets the kind of long rope that he does, right, Adrian?
Good point, but there's just one nuance I'd like to add to this. It's a very good point that you're making, but you know, a very, very senior officer to me said to me, who is in charge of subconventional and non-conventional warfare in Pakistan, that they actually may not have the equipment to take apart a standing army of 40,000 strong that exists in 5 or 6 cities and locales in one go. You know, the idea of how one de-radicalizes and how one lances that boil is actually a very, very difficult and intricate question, one that Britain has been struggling to tackle for more than a generation since 9/11, since 7/7, and that Pakistan is struggling to tackle too. Now, has it done it effectively? That's a question that we'll have to come back to in the next year or two as we see what unfolds. But I think they certainly have attempted to stymie quite a lot of the greater excesses of Lashkar Jangvi, Sipa Sahaba, the sectarian wings of those organisations. 2611 is a moot point. So little has been achieved there, and on this day in particular, I really feel for the victims and the families of survivors. There feels to me to have been very little justice. That much I agree with you.
Well, in fact, speaking of the victims and survivors, we have Dr. Vaswani who's joining us from Mumbai tonight, and Dr. Vaswani was in fact at the Taj Hotel when these attacks began that night. And Dr. Vaswani, not nice at all to have to remember what happened that day. Where were you when this unfolded that night?
I was at Taj, madam. I had just gone to see my patient. When I came down at about 10 minutes to 10, I saw all this thing. The terrorists were just in front of me, and somebody who told me, "Okay, you please," whispered me and told me, "You retreat because there's some terror gang war here." But then I didn't listen to him. I proceeded further, but then he pushed me aside, and then the terrorists fired AK-47. And I got a lift to escape, so I went to the room of my patient. Then all along I was there till next day evening. I was there in that room.
That's
at
pretty.
Taj.
That's quite scary. Dr. Vaswani, when you look at what has happened in the last 10 years with regard to the trial in Pakistan, the case itself, as someone who survived this horror, do you feel any sense of closure at all with Ajmal Kasab's hanging and the fact that that has happened here, but the main trial in Pakistan has just floundered?
The trial, Ajmal Kasab trial is okay, but they should do something for the people who have really done it. The main doers are still roaming free in this country.
And how do you, I mean, again, as someone who survived this attack, how do you look at the way India deals with Pakistan today? Do you think that there is a need to have a dialogue as a citizen, or do you think that we need to isolate the country? I just want to try and understand from everyone what they feel.
You should have a dialogue with such a country. You don't think so? You should have a dialogue with such a country. You should have a dialogue and talk to them.
We should have a dialogue.
This thing has to be done across the table. Yeah, you must have a dialogue.
I think that's a very important message coming from somebody who has survived a horrific attack like that, that you continue to say that there needs to be a sort of dialogue sitting across the table. We have Mr. Sharat Sabharwal, India's former High Commissioner to Pakistan, also joining us at this point. Mr. Sabharwal, it's an interesting time, and we're going to talk about this in just a little more detail in a while, because as we are commemorating 10 years of 2611, we're also seeing a sort of a thaw in the India-Pakistan relationship with the Kartarpur announcement just a couple of days ago. It's a very schizophrenic relationship, and it always has been. But where do we stand today, vis-a-vis Islamabad? Do you think 2611 is going to continue to define this relationship and always be that red line from which India approaches Islamabad until there is actually real progress in the trial there? And will there be?
Well, as has been said earlier in this program, there is no closure on 2611 from the Pakistani side. We awarded death sentence to Ajmal Kasab here, and he was executed. But on the other side, the mastermind is roaming free. All the others are free. Nobody has been convicted so far. There was some hope in July 2009 when they gave us a dossier based on the findings of their Federal Investigation Agency, which admitted that the conspiracy was hatched, that this terror attack was planned and executed by defunct Lashkar-e-Toiba, as they called it. And they used that adjective defunct time and again for Lashkar-e-Toiba in the document, perhaps to say that it was a banned organization. But we know that it's an organization which is alive and kicking. But thereafter, the trial faltered seriously, and it's almost stalled now. The judges were changed frequently. The case was adjourned time and again. The main prosecutor was assassinated, as Mr. Nikam said earlier. There was a commission which came here in 2012. They came again in 2013 to cross-examine the witnesses. and now it's almost dormant. There has been some mention of their wanting 24 Indian witnesses to go to Pakistan to testify. There are some reservations on the Indian side, but these procedural aspects apart, I am not very sanguine about anything significant coming out of this trial for two reasons. One, the mastermind, Hafiz Saeed, has not even been charged. They often say that he's been acquitted by courts. When you don't even charge a person of a certain crime, how can he be acquitted by courts? He was arrested under the Maintenance of Public Order Act, which is the equivalent of our preventive detention, and he was released from that detention. But he was never charged with having masterminded the Mumbai attack. And second, I believe the security organization and the security establishment in Pakistan is not keen to have these people convicted. After all, the persons under trial have been their proteges earlier. So, time and again they ask us to give more evidence, while most of the evidence should lie in Pakistan, because the terror attack was planned from there and executed from there. You asked me, where do we go from here? This is the mixed reality of Pakistan that I have spoken to on one of your shows earlier also.